Hi, everyone, and welcome to Lady Leadership. I'm super excited to be interviewing Alison Hill, who's the CEO of a company called Pragmatic Thinking. Now, Pragmatic Thinking have been a 3-time AFR Fast 100 company. They work with organisations to build better leaders by building better people. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Samantha. It's a delight to be hanging out with you in this virtual space.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're in sunny Queensland, and I'm in, beautiful one day, terrible the next Melbourne. So
It'll be sunny at some point.
Yeah, during the day, yeah, or 4 seasons in one day, crowded house, absolutely. So, but Queensland, beautiful one day, beautiful the next. So.
Yeah, it is pretty stunning, and I almost feel guilty saying that, but we've just had the most amazing weather, and coming into springtime, it's just, it is beautiful actually. So yeah, it's a magic place to be.
Yeah, I'm a bit jealous. We do, the family and I, we like to head up to Noosa actually, and we haven't, unfortunately, we normally go at this time of the year, and we haven't been able to get up there this year. And the kids are like, well, I just want to go to Noosa, so they just want to fish and they want to surf and, hang out with their friends in Hastings Street. So, yeah.
Yeah. I have a feeling once those borders are open, there'll be a flood coming this way.
Yeah, everyone in Victoria
Warmly welcomed.
Going to be driving out. Absolutely. The
Yes.
kids were asking the other day, how long would it take to drive to Noosa? Could we get through the border? I was like, I just don't think so.
Well, the funny thing is where I live, I live in Currumbin, which is the southern part of the Gold Coast, and I can literally see New South Wales from my house. So it's within a stone's throw. And yeah, there's I wouldn't do it at all, but there's kind of part of me going, surely we can just walk across that border. We can get into a forest and find a way. If there's a place to be stuck, so to speak, the southern part of the Gold Coast is pretty lovely.
Yeah, we are very lucky in Australia. We do have a beautiful country. So if we can't get out of here for the next year or so, then it's not going to be too bad. So yeah. So tell me then about Pragmatic Thinking. Tell me about the organisation.
Yeah, so Pragmatic Thinking, we are a behaviour and motivation strategy company, which is a lot of words, but essentially with a background in, I'm a psychologist by trade. We work with big corporates around their people strategy. So any business strategy essentially lives or dies the moment it hits people.
Yeah.
So it's either successful or it's not successful. You can have the best strategy in the world, but if people aren't engaged, lit up, motivated by it, that's where it becomes really, really hard. So the work that we do is often with leaders. So working on some of that leadership development around how do you engage, motivate, inspire, come up with a narrative and a story that people will want to follow, but also how do you have those conversations within your team or organization, those really tough conversations, the critical conversations that need to be had when people aren't performing or motivated or delivering. And that's often a bit of a gap in leadership around, just even having a strong feedback culture improves the business. I think 100-fold. So it's a really critical strategy.
And how do you think you achieve that then, that sort of that feedback or that openness and that ability to want to drive that type of culture?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's so many different ways, and often we're coming in and working with organisations where they're at. So it's looking at, well, how is feedback done here? And it can be everything from it's avoided, swept under the carpet, doesn't happen at all. Which, and that can be those places where everyone's nice. And so everyone's really nice here, but we don't actually call anything out. We don't challenge, and so your high performers really struggle in that environment because they want to be challenged. They want to have that ability to shift and change. And so everything is great, then performance goes down as well.
No one's talking about the real issues. Yeah.
No, not at all. And so even this sense of harmony, which sounds like a really lovely thing, can undermine feedback and performance. The other extreme is that we have these conversations, but they are they're almost like a we tell people what to do. They become a criticism or a weapon.
Yeah.
So you know exactly where you stand, but you're not at all motivated or inspired to do anything about it because you've just been told off in a lot of ways. And so that can really create quite a defensive, just do the bare minimum, just get through, lay low kind of
Yeah.
culture as well.
Yeah.
So part of it is to understand what's getting in the way. I think
Mm.
most people come to work and they want to do a good job. Very few come to work going, what can I do today to really stuff things up? Like that's
Yeah.
not people's intent.
Yeah.
Um,
I've heard that. I heard that a few years ago, and it's true. But it's then how are they encouraged to do the right thing? How are they allowed? How are they? Yep.
Yeah, so what's the role modeling that happens? What's the systems and structures that actually might become friction points for really good feedback to happen? What are our beliefs about feedback? And some of that can be from what we've seen with our parents. You just look them in the eye and you tell them straight and they've just got to get over it. That kind of sense can come from just kind of an upbringing as well. So it's meeting organizations where they're at,
Yeah.
but also we probably do a combination of training, so learning and development sessions, working with with leaders
Hmm.
around being equipped with the skills, so really, really practical tools to get results out of those conversations. Um, and then so that's kind of that leadership development. And
Yeah.
then the other component might be looking at some cultural shifts, which, like I said, it might be what are your processes, what are the rhythms around feedback. You can be doing it really well, but if you're only doing it twice a year, then that might not be enough for people to be getting feedback in the moment or to be able to
Mm.
adjust behaviours and shift changes. So it's really, yeah, it's very much kind of working with an organisation. What does success look like? And it's probably through those two streams of training and consultancy that we work with organisations around.
Yeah. And do you find, is it normally one person that comes to you and says, we've got it? Is there sometimes a catalyst for why they're seeking you out, or how does that generally work?
Yeah, often there is a catalyst. In the speed of change in organisations over the last, probably even over the last decade, it's not too hard to find a catalyst, and that can be a change of leadership. It can be a change of industry. It might be a change in the competitor environment. So often there is some reason why we need to make a change.
Mm.
That can come from pain or it can come from aspiration. So it can come from actually we
Yeah.
want to be better, we want to improve, we want to be number one. And how can we then, go from where we are now, which might be pretty good, to actually excelling.
Yeah.
Generally, the people who reach out to us, we often, success does happen from that top-down approach. So it's often talking to that executive group or someone who's in an executive role in organisational development or people and culture,
Mm.
um, or connecting with a CEO who's got a vision and an idea,
Yeah.
but requiring a roadmap on how do we roll this out, how do we get people on board with where we want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how's all of this gone then during COVID? How do you think this has impacted the way that we work and the way that we turn up and show up and talk to our teams, etc.?
Yeah, look, hugely, massively. I don't think there's, to put it into a one word answer, I don't think there's a single workplace that hasn't been affected or impacted
Yeah.
significantly by the way that we work, the way that we connect, the way that we've had to respond to change so quickly. And in some ways, it's been a delightful experiment to prove
Mm.
how quickly people can respond to change and make a difference. If you were to say to someone 12 months ago that your entire organisation will be working from home within 2 weeks, they would have
Yeah.
said, no way. We
Yeah.
need
That'd be
focus
horrifying. Yeah.
groups. We need,
Yeah.
change
Yeah. Yeah.
management processes. And yet it was able to be done when the purpose is high enough and the drive is so critical.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? You know, when the purpose is high enough and the drive's critical. So, talk to me then about what do you think companies are tackling at the moment. So, and I remember as we kind of went into COVID, you know, people sort of, you know, put the brakes a bit on, you know, new employees. It's like, well, how do we bring a new person on? And I think companies now have just had to kind of get over that. They have had to hire, they have had to bring new roles. So they've really had to review their processes. What is some of your recommendations in that space?
In terms of bringing on
On
a new
new,
team member.
yeah.
Yeah, look, it is a new way of connecting and operating, and I think there's actually a lot of benefits, and some of the organisations we're working with are embracing the fact that they can now source talent, for want of a better word, in an area that isn't restricted by geography. And so that then opens up the playing field for who can be connected and who can be bringing expertise into the organisation. And so I am finding those optimistic and leading organisations are the ones who are seeing the opportunity in that.
Yeah.
And I think that's across the board, not just in recruitment, but in every ways. Every habit we've ever had has been shook up. And so we do get this opportunity to innovate and think about that in a different way. From a really tangible, practical point of view, I think recruitment now needs to include how do people work in different locations. So talking through what might be the best way that they work. And having that as part of your recruitment conversation, and is that going to be a match for the culture and the way that we work in our team? So how do you bring your best? What are the tools that you need to operate at your best if you're not coming into an office or if you're not being surrounded by a team? What are your communication skills? So how effective are you at being able to reach out and ask questions if you don't know the answer? And it's a really critical one. If you're not in an office where you can just lean over to someone and ask them, you need to be able to have the skills and capability to either pick up the phone, send a text message, jump onto a quick Zoom call, use some kind of, whether it's Microsoft Teams or Slack, some kind of communication tool that's clear, directive, personable, approachable, but also gets the desired outcome. So if you're sitting at home, sitting on a bunch of questions, trying to work through something that a quick call to someone would help to solve, it's not going to be effective. So I think some of that is the shift in the questions that are asked in the recruitment process.
So part of it's with the company to kind of offer that, and then part of it's with the person as well, that they've got to up their communication and they've got to look for new ways to do that and to not sit on stuff and,
Yeah, absolutely. And then probably the big area we've been working in lately is around virtual leadership skills. So the skills that leaders had in a co-located team don't necessarily translate if you're now leading a team virtually. So we often talk to leaders around what's the psychology, so what do I need to believe, but also what's the psychology, what's going on for the people in my team. What are the methodologies for leading virtually? So the tools that we had in an office were get everyone into a boardroom. There are different ways that we can do that, and it's not just about, well, now we'll just jump onto a video conference call. There might be other methodologies that we can collaborate, that we can talk through ideas, using a whole range of different tools. And then the final one is technology. So what tools are at your disposal? We're using tools like Miro and Monday.com and Slack, but as well as just using, video messaging. So sending someone a quick, instead of a text message, send them a video message. It might be 30 seconds long, but it's a beautiful way to kind of connect from a personal point of view. So just needing to have the tools of leading virtually. So when it comes to recruiting leaders, I actually think now it's going to be a skill that will be asked even as we move forward in the next 5 years, of evidence of, have you successfully led a virtual team or a remote team?
Yeah. And I think, I've worked in technology my whole life, and I lived over in the UK, and I worked for I worked for a global business, and all of the work that I did wasn't in the UK. And so half my time was spent leading teams virtually. And we didn't have video back then. We didn't have, I don't know that we even, I think we had text messaging. But it wasn't like you weren't text messaging people. So we didn't have Zoom. We didn't have, Microsoft meetups or whatever. I actually knew the numbers for the video conferencing. And I think it was like
Off
about
by heart.
30 digits off by heart, because you would do a lot of, but I could, and so it was very outcome focused in terms of
Yes.
delivery. But you could tell within that team who was working and who wasn't. It was quite easy. Like, if you're, as a leader, if you're concerned about outcomes and you're concerned about managing the teams. But what I also knew was every time that so I would fly to different countries. It was a great job, actually. And 2 days there was like 2 weeks, because you could then have that more interpersonal connection.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sort of take away, I think, from that face to face, and I think it really shows you the value of that face to face. So I got that experience, quite a long time ago. And I think also I had a job where I actually was, again, rolling out systems to places, and I didn't actually go into an office at all, I think, for about 2 years. And so again, that real kind of virtual stuff. But then it's like the whole place. But I think that it's been quite a shift that some people, I think in Australia, we tend to be located quite close to each other. There does seem to be that, go to an office mentality. And I think this has kind of probably turned it on its head for Australia. I think other parts of the world have been working like this for a while. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, most organisations work from home, or flexible leave policies were grossly underrepresented for what we've faced. And I think we've now, like any research you look into habit formation, some research says it takes 3 days, some say it takes 21 days, some say it takes 12 weeks. Whichever research you look at, we have exceeded all of those timelines, right? So we are now in
habit,
new habits, and the feedback is people are more productive. There's not the interruptions and distractions that are happening in an office. They're more connected to family. They can go and exercise in the middle of the day, or sit down and do 10 burpees in their home office if they want to, which would be weird in a co-located office. And so there is a huge amount of upside, let alone CFOs now actually going, what did we pay for that office space for? Because we've proven we don't need it, and we can use those resources, financial resources, elsewhere. So yeah, I agree with you. I think this shift has actually opened up the eyes for a lot of companies here in Australia.
And look, and it is that CFO looking at the bottom line. And I've spoken to a few CEOs recently, and they have said, look, we've reopened our office, but we're finding that we're finding sort of two sorts of people are maybe going in: the very social, and the people that have got extremely young children, and they, which makes sense to me. But they're only going in for a couple of days. So if their child is at childcare, then they'll most likely work from home. And so they are finding that, but they also said their productivity has actually increased as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the trend that it is the trend that we are seeing. So I'm currently in the process of, we're writing a book called Work From Anywhere, which will be out in April 2021.
Oh, yes.
But really around how can you create a world-class hybrid team, and that's certainly the terminology. This hybrid team, which sits between, out one end is this fully co-located. You have an office and you come back to home base kind of team, versus the other extreme, which is a fully distributed, a fully remote team where you hardly ever, very, very rarely ever come together. It's all done in different locations. So hybrid teams sit between those two. And it's really quite fluid based on need and demand, and also based on preferences. So that ability for people to choose, where can I do my best work? And if that is coming in a day a week, or maybe for this project, I'm going to come in 2 days a week for the next 3 weeks, but then I won't need to, because then I can, really bust in and do some stuff at home. So the fluidity of it, I think, is going to be really attractive. It also, and this comes to your point that you mentioned before, the value of when we do get face to face becomes so strengthened. And I think it's what I'm seeing is organizations that are very mindful and intentional about the face to face being quality experiences, that we are actually building rapport, that we're spending time together to find out about each other, to build trust, becomes so important, because that it becomes the foundation for how quickly we can work together. Trust begets speed. When we have a level of trust, then we don't make negative assumptions, we make positive ones. And the speed of work happens really quickly. So a word of warning I would say to organizations is, when you get people face to face or coming into the office, don't waste that time. Don't sit them in front of a PowerPoint presentation that you could have sent them. Don't make it numb and boring, otherwise people won't come back in. They'll prefer to stay home, or even working from, say, a co-working space somewhere else. So I think really value those times together.
Do you think it's down to the leader sometimes and their preference or their experience? I know I've worked with leaders that I remember when I was heavily pregnant with my second child, someone said to me, and I was in a senior role, they said, because you're pregnant, I don't expect you to not be in the office at all. Which, hindsight, well, it was about 10 years ago, but probably not a great thing to say. But anyway, he was like, it's not that I don't trust you, it's just that I don't want everyone else to see, and this is fascinating, that I'm allowing for people to work from home.
So special privileges, or
no special privileges. I wasn't even asking. The funny thing was, I wasn't even asking to work from home, but he was sort of very clear. And funnily enough, I actually didn't even report to him. I reported into the technology area, and but I was providing a technology for his area.
What that speaks to me is, so much of strategy is driven by psychology. So what that speaks to me is fear. This fear of it. It probably wasn't even fear of you. It was fear of, what if I get 20 other requests?
Correct.
And I don't have an answer for them. And I am being seen as, treating someone differently. The problem with that is we get a really beige kind of response and experience. I absolutely, in response to your your question, does it depend on the leader? Absolutely. And I will put my hand up to say, we work with organizations around culture, and so the culture in my team in Pragmatic Thinking is first and foremost in everything that we do. We don't want to be the plumber with the leaky taps. We need to focus and obsess about culture as well. And so
sorry, I'm not meaning to interrupt.
No, you're right. I can tell you, up until March this year, I was a card carrying champion of have people together. We were a high touch culture, come together often. If we start to become fragmented, then pockets will happen. And that was a belief that I held. And COVID-19 has shifted that belief substantially for me. So I think it's about leaders looking at what are they afraid of, and being really honest with themselves to be able to go, okay, well, let's look at that fear. Is it a true fear, or is it an assumption that I'm making up? And if it were to come true, what might be some ways around that? And what's my belief about people's capacity to work from anywhere? And when we start with that, then things change.
Because I think there are some leaders certainly that are afraid, and I say this because I've worked with them, that, and this is possibly an example before, is that work won't get done if you're not sat here right in front of me.
Yes, and sometimes the fear is the right work won't get done. So you'll do work, but it might not be on the right thing, or you'll spend too long on it, or you won't spend long enough unless I can see that.
And that's control, and that's in that space, isn't it?
It is, and sometimes that if I put compassion into that, that can be because they're being looked at from their leaders above them, saying, well, I need to know that this is getting done, and it's on your head if it doesn't get done. And so, if you understand that in the context of their job and their role, and then you can understand where some of that sense of control can come from. But and you said this just a moment ago, is when people are working and when they're not. And so in the same way, in an office you knew or you didn't know.
I don't need to be sat there.
No.
Yeah.
And I do wonder if it's actually easier to hide in an office than it is when you're working from home.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've always done a piece with my team, and where we've just got together for 15 minutes in the morning, and as a group talked about, what am I doing today? What's blocking me? What help do I need from someone else, etc. So and within that also you get connection in terms of, we might talk about the weekend, or we might talk about what else is going on, but that's that kind of leadership group getting together. Really hard to hide in that forum if you're not doing anything.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes leaders aren't as open with what they're actually doing. So they're worried about what the team's doing. But what I often hear back from people, I don't know what my boss is doing.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So that's where the value of, having these open conversations or having these, but you're right, you can't hide. If you say the same thing 3 days in a row, it becomes so obvious.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That, oh, you're still working on that. So what are you actually doing on that? And do you need some help?
Do you need some help? Yeah. And I mean, and look, I've had people that have decided to move on through that process because they're just not quite right for the role, or they're not right for the group, or,
Yes.
it comes out basically.
Yeah. What we're finding in some of the ways to, I guess, be truthful around that fear is, performance is at the bedrock for most teams and even most cultures, but even more so now in the middle of a recession, that businesses have to perform in order to continue to exist, in order for people to continue to have a job. And that performance metric will be different for every business, for every team. Some of it will be revenue, some of it will be engagement, some of it will be, for non-for-profits, it'll be something slightly different. But there is an element of performance that's really critical. So I think in probably even more so for teams that are working in different locations, how important it is to set expectations of what performance looks like and what are we running at. And the more you can visualize that, the easier it is for people to perform.
Yeah.
And again, and this probably comes back to your background and knowledge, but what technology can you use to make that performance really clear? And it allows other people in the team that goes, if I've got some space or capacity, I can see that Sarah's really, really busy and under the pump getting that delivered, so I'll reach out to Sarah and help her out. So if you can use, so we've just gone to monday.com, there's Trello, Asana, any of those project management tools to map out what are the tasks, what are we running at, what are the milestones, what's going to get delivered. You'll see really clearly, where are those kind of sticking points? And that's where you come back and have the conversation around that rather than personally around you're not working.
Yeah, that's right. And it might just be that whatever task that person's working on, they've run out of work.
Yeah.
And not everyone puts their hand up and says, I've run out of work.
No, it can almost feel like a career limiting conversation, right? You don't want to say I've run out of work. But
and then it's the ability for the other people who are doing that to not be offended and to accept that help as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that comes back to psychology and beliefs and the way that we connect with people.
And kind of team and helping each other out rather than it being a bad thing. So
Yes.
how do you then, in sort of where we're at the moment, address underperformance in teams?
Yeah, look, in the same way that you did in a co-located office, don't
Yeah,
avoid it, actually have
yeah, yeah.
a
Have the
conversation. So
conversation.
that's probably number one. And I know that sounds incredibly obvious, but there are plenty of times where I'll go in and talk to leaders, and what I hear is, I know someone's underperforming, I'm just gathering more data, I'm getting more evidence, and then I'll talk to them about it. And so I almost feel for the person that's underperforming, because I'm like, they don't even know that there is a mismatch. They
Mm,
might, but they
mm.
certainly don't know that that you're having this whole kind of reality about them. So number one is definitely have the conversation. Um, Secondly, I would be thinking about the context, and 2020 is a really interesting year for a lot of people, and there's huge amounts of organisations that are talking about mental health and well-being and those sorts of things. But if it has been a change for the person that you're, you know,
Yeah.
wanting to talk to, if they are a performer and now they're not performing, sometimes maybe understanding the context. So just rather than coming in with a straight performance conversation, it can just be having that conversation around what else is going on for you? How are you finding things at the moment? How's
Mm,
work working? Because this is really different. And when we started this, people were doing it on their dining table, as you say, with small kids around. Sometimes, there are plenty of people that are dealing with small kids and aging parents,
yeah. Yeah.
trying to keep them okay, families that they can't get to. Like even in our team since March, we've had a fellow that was due to get married in June, which is an amazing thing, but couldn't get have
Yeah.
120 people, ended up having 5 people and they got married. But that's a huge disruption on a personal level. We've had someone announce their pregnancy. We've had people that have had grandparents and parents pass away, um, who have only been able to go to very, very small funerals. So like there's just other things that are
Yeah.
impacting. So I think have the conversation, check in around context, just to have an understanding of what might be going on. And that might be enough to put together a bit of a plan around getting them back to performing.
Yeah.
If it is ongoing and there's nothing really in that kind of context, then talking to people specifically about behaviours. So often one of the things I find leaders do is actually talk in terms of general terms, what we call traits. So I
Mm,
need you to take more initiative. I need you to be a team player. I need you to work harder on this report. Those things are traits. And all of us nod when we hear those terms, we understand them. But all of us have a slightly different variation of what initiative,
what that
hardworking,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
actually
What
mean.
that means, what the
Yeah.
what the true expectations
So
mean.
the
Yeah.
the clearer you can be, so you can say things like, I need you to take more initiative. What I need you to do is book a meeting at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning with these 3 people. I need you to have the progress report ready, and I need you to take notes at the meeting. So then you've got 3 really clear behaviours that people can step
Mm,
into, and it becomes easier to have the conversation afterwards if the behaviours aren't done. It also means you're not talking about them as a person, you're just talking about the tasks that need to be done.
yeah.
It's not
Talk.
judgmental, it's not
Yeah.
right or wrong, it's just this needs to be done, I'm not seeing it be done.
Yeah. Talking about the work. Yeah.
Yeah,
Making it about the work rather than
yeah.
them. Yeah. Absolutely.
And
Um. You go.
the final tip, and this is a really practical one, and one that I find a lot of people get a lot out of. We talk about directing the conversation to a third point, and what I mean by that is, for many years we've been told, you look people in the eye, and you have the direct conversation there. The thing with that is that often tough conversations can get quite personal and defensive when we do that. So eye contact, even in a video conferencing setting, is where we build rapport and connection.
Mm.
And if we're having tough conversations there, it can feel really personal. So shifting the conversation to a third point is about talking to something except that's not just, you know, the face-to-face. So in a virtual setting, it might be, for example, we're on Zoom right here, it might be that I share a screen about a report that
Oh,
I want to
gotcha.
talk to you
Yeah,
about.
gotcha. Yeah.
And
So you're
so
not, it's not right at them. Yeah.
it's not right at them, it's actually at the report, which is what we need to address. Or if it's about customer service, I might even just share some notes that I've got on what I need to see from
Gotcha.
customer
Yeah,
service,
yeah,
and I'll share that up on the screen.
yeah.
It might be that you can, if you're on a phone instead of video, getting someone to write down, you know, 3 words. So grab a pen and piece of paper. I want you to write down customer service, you know, quality and performance, and I'm going to talk to you about these 3. And that way they're quite active in it,
It's
but it also,
directive and yeah, active. Yeah, yeah,
it's directing it to a third place
yeah.
away from that. So then
Then
when you want to come back to solution, so what are we going to do from here? Then you come back to eye contact and directing the conversation with that person. It's really, really handy if you're also receiving tough feedback.
mm,
That if you feel like you're in the spotlight, shifting it to a third point, to so if a manager's talking to you around something they want changed, just saying, can I bring this up on screen, and we can then make sure we're on the same page. Um,
nice.
or let me just jot down so I've got the words exactly from what, so I'm hearing what you're saying. What
Mm.
do you want me to do as a result of this moving forward? So yeah, clear in language, clear in the way where you direct that conversation will make all the difference.
I think I might need to use this with my 9-year-old.
Oh, it is so good with kids. Yeah, it's funny you say that actually. One of the biggest feedbacks, so we have a program called Dealing with the Tough Stuff, and we go
Yeah.
through in a lot more detail around these really practical tips. Probably the number one feedback we've had from the program, leaders will walk out and go, that was great. I really love it. It works with my team, but it really works with my teenagers. It really works with my
Yeah.
kids. So it's very effective in a few different areas for sure.
Yeah, no, my younger one doesn't really like that kind of confrontation and that feedback and that those difficult conversations at all. So, thank you so much, Alison, for your time today. I've loved chatting to you. I think that's a really great tip for people who find themselves in that situation, needing to have difficult conversations. I think it just doesn't seem as confrontational to use that.
No, and I think if
Before we
you,
finish,
sorry to interrupt, Samantha, I
you,
was just going to say what if using those means you're having those conversations more regularly as well. So it's
yeah,
not this
yeah,
just I'm having one conversation, I've got to solve everything in that, which then becomes more emotional and more loaded. So
yeah,
having those much more regular touch points and check-ins becomes
yeah.
really, really effective.
Yeah, it's not a surprise as well for the person.
Yeah.
Okay, so just before we finish up, just how do you think leaders could be looking after the mental health of their teams while they are working remotely? What's some extra things that they can do?
Yeah, look, I think again, just to acknowledge, you know, it sort of comes back to that kind of being authentic. Some of that can just be sharing, leaders being, you know, sharing what's going on for them. And I don't mean that they have to kind of
Mm,
air the dirty laundry, but really
yeah,
just to acknowledge that, you know, there are things that I'm kind of struggling with as well, or I'm having moments where things are kind of going up and down. We are finding and you know possibly is a bit compounded sorry with COVID-19, that the motivation roller coaster for work is much higher. So the highs are higher, so we're much more
yeah,
productive and things are
right.
getting done,
Yeah,
but the
yeah,
lows are lower because there's not that
yeah.
safety net of an office or someone to go and have a cup of tea with that just picks you up. So
Gotcha. Yeah.
I think it's seeing some of those little changes where someone who might speak up at a video, like a team meeting, is not speaking up. Bit of a change in energy, a change, withdrawing a little bit, paying attention to that, and just
Yeah.
making the time to reach out, asking those questions, sharing what's going on for them, and allowing the space with the team to really kind of normalize that. I've actually been talking to leaders about grief and loss this year, the loss
Yeah.
of the plans we
Right.
had. We were only talking
Yeah.
before about, coming up to Noosa is a family tradition. And whilst
Yeah.
it's not on the
Yeah.
grand scheme of being, a major problem, it's still a loss. There's
Yeah.
still a sense of, oh, we haven't been able to do that for no reason of our own. And
Yeah.
there's just something that's been quite different about this year. And therefore, if you think about grief and loss, all of those responses like bargaining and anger and denial and depression and acceptance are all part of the really normal, natural response for how people are understanding and comprehending this year. So for leaders to step into that is really valuable for their team.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And it is just, being more in tune, really, isn't it?
Yeah, just that permission that it's
Mm.
okay
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
pause at times.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Alison. I've really enjoyed that chat. It's such good advice for anyone that is leading a team and, to check in with people and, have those difficult conversations if you need to. And I think they're great tips around that. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed the chat.
I've loved it. Thank you so much, Samantha.
Cheers.